coronavirus had Dr. Mom becoming an online professor. And so trying to figure out how we have a whiteboard, Lucas, my son, let us borrow his imagination and whiteboard. So let's do this. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 8. And Chapter 8 is all about hypothesis testing. So hypothesis testing essentially has 4 steps. And so when we talk about hypothesis testing, we have to understand exactly what it is. Hypothesis testing is basically taking the statistics from a sample to understand and make assumptions about a population. And we're going to make a comparison to see if that sample is a good representation of that population. And so there's basic 4 steps. So if you look at the 4 steps, you're going to hopefully be able to see how they build up working with one another. So the first one would be state the hypothesis. And essentially you're going to have 2 hypotheses. You're going to have the HO, which is basically the null hypothesis, and you're going to have the H1, or other words also seen in other different types of research or books or on YouTube. You'll see them as HA, which is the alternative hypothesis. So the null hypothesis essentially is going to be the hypothesis that says there is no difference and there is no change between what's going on now and what you're doing. And essentially the alternative hypothesis is that you are doing something significantly different than what's already been done. Once we state our hypothesis or our educated guess, then we go on to our second step. Our second step is going to be set a criteria. When you set a criteria, you start thinking about things like what characteristics does your sample need to have. Your sample can have a sample size, a sample type, experimental design, all these different things. But for hypothesis testing, it's really interested in 2 or sometimes 3 different things. The first one is called the alpha level, or Greek letter, or Greek symbol for alpha. Then it's interested in the critical region. Then it's also interested in degrees of freedom if we go beyond the one sample z-test. In this video, we're going to talk essentially about the one sample z-test when we go beyond using this. So degrees of freedom really won't count right now. But remember, there is a third piece to this. When we go to step 3, we're going to talk about now compute and analyze. So essentially you're going to run your test and get results and think about the analysis of those results. And hopefully you're starting to see that when you look at this, you need to actually have an educated guess, which one will lead you to the criteria of your sample, and then will lead you to your actual test, which test you'll run to compute in the analysis. But if you do one without the other, you'll get confused or you might get stuck. You have to understand it's like the scientific method. You have to go in order, from the first to the second to the third and to the fourth. If you go out of order, you're going to tend to get confused and you won't understand what to do with the results of each of the different steps. So once you actually have an educated guess, and then once you have to set a criteria, and you actually run your test and analyze the results, you do the final step, which common sense will tell you, make a decision. And because we're talking psychology, in this decision, we would actually write it up in what's called APA format.